In this video, we're going to take a little listen to some research that just came out regarding maternal instinct. And you tell me with spiritual eyes what's happening right here. What is science, the false god of science, trying to set up? They've already set up this propaganda that you can choose gender, that you should wait in order to assign a gender, not that God assigned the gender at birth through basic biology. The entire idea within science is hate the creator, total rejection of the creator as a matter of fact, and it's been that way since the beginning. Long before Darwinism, you had philosophers coming on the scene, rejecting everything that God has established and making their own bright ideas about what truth and reality is. That's how science began. And then you had Darwin come along and blatantly and overtly reject the creator. No creator. You guys evolved. You're your own gods. And everything he's established is no longer important. You don't have to care about your neighbor. You don't have to pray for your enemies. You don't have to give mercy. You don't have to do any of that because you're here to compete. You are here to compete in order to survive. Exact opposite of what God established. So it's this different kind of gospel. Now, fast forward to the year 2022, and you see everything that we have. Men claiming that they can chest feed, that you can completely reject what the creator has established. And you can, you don't have to be a male or female. You could just be androgynous. You could wake up and decide what you feel like today. You can turn yourself into a caricature. And as long as you look like a female or you look like a male, then that's what you are. If that's what you feel like, that's what you are, and you get to choose that. So there is a theme embedded in this false gospel, this false god of science, and its gospel of research. Now the question being raised today is whether or not there's any maternal instinct. So let's listen to a little bit of this interview.
So Chelsea is joining me more this morning here live to talk about this essay and also her new book as well. Chelsea, it's good to have you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right. So catch people up here that are watching right now. What is this new research saying that sort of contradicts this idea of the maternal instinct?
The new research is really saying that the neurobiological changes that a parent goes through are real and profound and long-lasting. But this idea of maternal instinct as something that is, wholly innate and automatic and uniquely female, that's a myth. And the science is challenging that in really interesting ways.
All right. So in what ways is it impacting in men that maybe we're not noticing?
The father's brains, really all parents' brains are changed by the experience of caring for a baby. This tiny, nonverbal, vulnerable creature is a really powerful stimulus for our brains. And when it comes to parenting, experience really matters a lot for all parents, including mothers. There are these major hormonal shifts that we associate with pregnancy and childbirth and lactation, but actually fathers and other parents experience hormonal shifts also, and it's thought that those all sort of prime the brain for to be ready to be exposed to this, to newborns who help mold us into the parents that they need us to be.
Okay, this is really fascinating, and I feel like I have sort of a two-part question here. I mean, how do you change an idea of the maternal instinct? I mean, that is something that we've heard. It's so ingrained in our culture, and we've heard it for years. I mean, how do you change that myth, if that's what we're talking about here?
It's really a very good question. This was an idea that was written into science by men who held fast to these religious, moral ideas of what a woman should be. And back in the early part of the 20th century, when they were really writing the instinct theory and putting this into science, there were some feminists even then who were trying to debunk it, right from the start, to say, we know what...
Okay, are you hearing this? This is what I've been telling you since the beginning, since I started this channel on YouTube, is that this is the Antichrist spirit trying to come against what God has established. And it all comes down to wanting to debunk what men established through their religious ideas. And by the way, the reason why they want to come against men is because men were leading the church. They're never going to say that these were men who were Christian, who were men set apart by God, that this is what God established, because they don't acknowledge God. And the crazy thing is, like, do you hear the way she's even talking about infants? These nonverbal little creatures who change us, like we're just responding to them. We're responding to something that is very innate, that is very much in the design that the Creator gave us. And you can hear the conflicts in what she's saying to begin with. You can hear that she's saying, yeah, there's these hormonal changes and there's no doubt that we do change. Well, hello, that's innate. You know, the fact that a woman starts to produce milk is not because of hormones. Where did hormones come from then? She's producing milk in order to feed her child. That's innate. That is an innate maternal instinct. Is she now saying that emotional instincts are not innate, only physical? And is it the brain that's telling the breast to produce milk? Do you see how this lends itself to this total idolatry of self? I mean, what are these people thinking? Like, what makes this whole machine function? Why is it that in scripture, God talks about an ostrich who goes through all of this birthing process and then abandons her young? And he says, because God did not endow her with wisdom or give her a share of good sense. She's invested in this whole process and then she just abandons her young. God has absolutely given wisdom to human beings in order to parent their babies. Maternal instinct, maternal wisdom that is built into her design in order to physically feed her baby, physically grow her baby, and emotionally care for her baby. He's also, by the way, given paternal wisdom to fathers to lead and mentor and protect. But see, what this research, this spirit of the Antichrist wants to do through science and research is to completely eliminate all understanding, all regard for the Creator. And in doing so, we cannot understand the creation. And I still hear Christians telling me, well, I think God can use godly people in the sciences. Why? Why would he do that? Why would he do that? Is this the fruit of a place that God resides? Of a field in which God resides? Is this a gospel that God causes Christian people to ingest and then go and perpetuate within the fields of science, within the disciplines of science? This is a real problem. This is a real problem that anyone claiming to be Christian would believe that. The attitude in the spirit behind this field is hate the Creator, hate the creation, blur the lines between male and female, totally destroy what God established, perpetuate a false gospel, and do it through a field and research their means that have been set up in the world as experts, even though you know and I know that it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense that research keeps perpetuating big pharma. It doesn't make sense that what they discover this year, they debunk the next. It doesn't make common sense that God would not instill in a woman or a man wisdom to care for their young. These people aren't even speaking the same language. It's not even a reasonable language. Like, they don't even see that infant as being a soul, a creation of God, one in whom we're supposed to invest, one in whom we're supposed to raise back up to God, a nonverbal, vulnerable creature that is a powerful stimulus for our brains. Does that sound like understanding to you? Does that sound like wisdom to you? Because there are a lot of nonverbal, vulnerable creatures who are a stimulus for our brains. My dogs are nonverbal, vulnerable creatures that are a stimulus for my brain. But I have different wisdom about how to take care of them versus how to take care of my own daughter, versus how to take care of my own grandchild, or how to invest in my son-in-law. There is God-given wisdom inside of me. Stop calling it instincts and start understanding it as wisdom that God has given to the creatures that he has created to care for their young, to invest in their family, even their family that is not blood related. Because we know we've been given wisdom by God to understand that we are investing in our spiritual eternal family. That as a mother, whether my daughter is an infant or she's however old she is now, however old she'll be in the future, that I have a maternal responsibility to spiritually feed her, to keep her in the fold, to hold my children accountable, to do hard things that are not comfortable, because I know that that's what's good for them. That's called maternal wisdom, and it is something that is given by God, and it is very much real. It is just as real as what God designed my body to do in order to physically feed and grow her. That's God's creation. And all this talk about instincts and brain and measurability, it's all intended to establish a different truth, a truth that completely eliminates God and prohibits understanding, because the minute you eliminate God and what he's established, you have no understanding. Please be careful what you're ingesting. It's one thing to observe certain things, and it's a whole other thing to start making deductions, to make your own story around what you're observing. A story that, by the way, is completely devoid of God, completely devoid of what he has taught us. And what is problematic is that these people don't understand what's actually going on when a mother abandons her child, when a mother doesn't care about her child. And that, by the way, is what they're engendering. You can just kill your child. They're just cells. You don't need to care about your kid. Care about yourself. Go do you. You got to live your life. A person who's able to adapt that idea, or adapt the idea that a mother's not really needed. 2 men can raise a baby. 2 women can raise a baby. A man's not needed. God established things in the physical in order to teach us the spiritual, in order to teach us what's important to him. So if a mother and a father are required in order to make a baby, a mother and a father are required to raise that baby, and he's going to endow them with the wisdom to do that and to do it correctly. If they don't have that wisdom, if for some reason they're able to abandon their baby, they're able to just let that baby be somewhere in the world, and they're not paying for that baby to be taken care of, they're just okay with somebody else taking care of that baby, they have no role in that. I'm going to tell you the reason they don't have wisdom: because they care more about themselves, and that is not coming because God didn't endow them with the ability to care. It's because they chose a different spirit. It's because they chose themselves, and they are inhabited by a different spirit. When they start caring about others and they start caring about what God cares about, then they'll go find that baby. And I'll tell you why. Because the Spirit of God will then move them to do that. That's the spiritual nature of what's going on. It doesn't have to do with that person not having some sort of an instinct or the brain capacity. It has to do with that spirit interfering in their capacity. And that spirit, you need to understand, got in because they cared more about themselves, because they succumbed to the desires of their flesh. If they chose the Spirit of God and God was the Spirit moving them, they would then be able to tap into that wisdom, would then be moved to raise that child to him. And you want to say, well, now you're talking about, something else in addition to the person. Let me tell you something. There is no separation. There is no compartmentalization of who you are and then who God is and then who Satan is. You are designed to be a vessel. You either have the Spirit of God or you have the spirit of Satan. God has designed you for him, but if you're going to choose Satan, that's what will inhabit you. And you know what? He will prohibit you from being able to connect to your children. He will prohibit a mother from taking care of her children. He will cause her to abandon her children. Is that because God didn't design her or equip her with maternal instinct or wisdom? No, it's because she's inhabited by a spirit that causes her to live in contradiction with the design God gave her. And when you understand that, then you can do something about it. But you see, what science establishes is that that's who you are. You're just, you're not motherly. You just don't have a maternal instinct. It's just not in you. That's not your identity. That's not how God made you. Garbage. It's also garbage on the father's end, because we have a whole lot of fathers who have abandoned their children. It is not because they have not been equipped with paternal wisdom. It's because they're selfish. It is not because that is their identity. It's because that's the spirit they've chosen. We need to be calling this like it is. Instead of deferring to science to tell us what the situation is, we need to return to what God has said. to what he has established. And so that is the reason why I believe it is ridiculous to say that God would use a godly person in a discipline like science, in a field like science, in any scientific discipline. He will not use them. There cannot possibly be truth in someone who is double-minded like that, who accepts this garbage from science and also claims to be Christian, because inevitably, if they're in that field, if they are operating in that field, that is the priority. That is their God. If you have abandoned your children, if you have made mistakes with your children that caused you to not do the things that are actually inherent in you from the Spirit of God, from the creation and the design that He gave you, those things are inherent in you. Because I get a lot of messages from parents who are devastated that they did not raise their children correctly, that they made mistakes with their children, and that their children are suffering. A lot of messages. If that is what you did and you're still alive, you still have time to make that better. You still have time to return to the Spirit of God, let Him deal with you, and He will bless your children, and He will restore those relationships, and you will be able to influence your children and spiritually nourish them. Listen to the order of things again, because a lot of people hear that and they go and run out and start making apologies they're not ready to make yet because they haven't examined themselves. They haven't done the work and they haven't received God's ministry. If you have abandoned your children, if you have hurt your children and you are still alive, you still have an opportunity to return to the Spirit of God, to let Him deal with you, to examine yourself, to receive His ministry, to be changed, and then He will restore you and He will restore your relationships with your children. He will bless your relationships with your children, and you will have an opportunity to nourish them because that's the authority He gave you. You don't need to say or think that it's too late for that, because with you and with science, these things are not possible, but with God, all things are possible. It's not a mistake that you are the parent of those children. It's not a coincidence. It's not some sort of scientific prediction because you had intercourse and therefore you bore a child. There are a lot of people who have intercourse and cannot bear a child. God has not given that to them. It's not a coincidence. It is by design, and it was by intention that those children came from you. And you have been given authority. You have been given wisdom that needs to be tapped into by receiving the Spirit of God and inhabiting yourself with His Spirit, fanning into flame that Spirit. I really pray that this reaches the people that it needs to reach, because there are a lot of people, again, who contact me and they're devastated about this. And that should tell you something. If you feel remorseful, if you feel sad, if you feel regret that you didn't do certain things with your children, that you weren't there for them, well, what is that? What is that if that's not inherent in you? If the desire, if the sense of responsibility, if the wisdom of what you should have done is in you, then what is that? It's wisdom. It's wisdom that God bestowed. It's not an instinct. It's wisdom that was your responsibility. And it is not too late. It is not too late. It's too late for you to go back and redo anything, but it's not too late for you to pick that up now. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.